President Robert Metafuente of the Philippine Association of the Professional Regulatory Board Members Incorporated, its officers, fellow professionals from all corners of the country, ladies and gentlemen, a pleasant day to all of you. As I look at your program for the 10th Philippine Professional Summit, I cannot help but be amazed at how you have sustained your objectives for all these years. More so because, as your program provides, the one challenge that professionals face today is the VUCA world, which means volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity of the environment we now live in. With COVID-19, the more the VUCA characteristics have persisted and even strengthened, when it is our hope that the VUCA-ness be minimized as we grow in our respective workplaces and professions. But so far, there is yet no end in sight for such a wish or desire. Professionals may be disheartened, but not for long, for they have a platform to share with, and that is the Philippine Professional Summit. So the topic assigned to me is the future we want, the professional we need, innovating for human development, a local perspective. So the following are the objectives. First is really for us to understand how futures thinking and foresight support professional development. We'll immerse a little with the strategic tools of futures thinking and foresight and apply its tenets to the professional development. And likewise, with that immersion, we'll be able to adapt to the principles of futures thinking and foresight as a wise leader, as an anticipatory leader. And of course, being that mindset, we'll be able to explore emerging issues and trends in a VUCA world. Another thing that I want to share with you is the contextualization of this framework. And this is called the Features, Leadership, and Governance Framework, wherein Hiraya foresight is being introduced, and that is really about the local perspective. And lastly, this presentation will provide a practical application of the framework to current and future pandemics for making civil servants futures ready. So the context again is COVID-19, the disruption, the discontinuity, and the disturbance. And even Diamandis and Cutler in the book, The Future is Faster Than You Think, they post the 6 Ds of exponentials. And these are digitalization, deception, disruption, demonetization, dematerialization, and democratization. And what is the impact of these 6 Ds of exponentials? So a lot. Now, aside from that, we have the so-called futurist metaphorical menagerie. Here, we see the so-called unknown and unspoken. And according to Robert Hickson, we have gray rhinos, we have black elephant, black swan, black jellyfish. And these are some of the things and events that we think, like for example, the black jellyfish, we think we know and understand, but these events turned out to be more complex and uncertain than we expected. So the future that we want is a subject matter that suggests an ideal scenario of communities, of families, living happily without problems, without worries, and satisfied with their own lives. So how are we going to achieve this kind of future? And how do we create our preferred future? We want a feature that is stable, safe, secured, understandable, predictable, orderly, and within our control. So with that kind of feature that we want, we need professionals who are really into the so-called anticipatory mindset. Professionals whom we need in the future are professionals who can play a role in a future scenario of a prosperous Philippines. And professionals, likewise, who can apply their expertise by not just working in the comfort of their office jobs, but may contribute more to knowledge production and sharing if they go into teaching and research, and likewise in managing the daily affairs of the Philippine bureaucracy. So with that, to prepare themselves for the future, professionals must be future thinkers. And what do we expect from future thinkers? So first, futures thinking is a set of competencies, and these competencies, once acquired, make professionals attuned to the fast changes that surround us, meaning to say that we are not surprised of anything that will happen in the near future because we have that so-called anticipatory mindset. So in that kind of situation and in that kind of mindset, we really need to have the so-called process of changing mindset from fixed mindset to growth mindset. That is why I'm showing this framework introduced by Dr. Alex Brillantes and myself, which was published in the United Nations report, that a changing mindset will really introduce remarkable innovations in the public sector compared to rules and policies. And that's really according to the study of United Nations. Another is the Features, Leadership, and Governance Framework inspired by that GRF, or the Governance Reform Framework. Here, as you can see, we have the wrapping mechanism, which is frenetic leadership. And who is a frenetic leader? A frenetic leader has 6 abilities. And these are the 6 abilities as shown in the slide. And those 6 abilities would really redound to common good. Another thing that we need to look at too is, of course, the skill sets, the features thinking skill set and the foresight thing. But in this framework, we localized it or contextualized it, and it is Hiraya foresight. Another handle is knowledge co-creation. In knowledge co-creation, it means we share knowledge to each other. Knowledge is the new oil, right? As the new oil, we can produce a number of innovations, particularly social innovations down to technological innovation. And with that innovation, we can introduce agility in our organization. But equally important really is to look at our vision as a country, and that is stipulated in our constitution, which is to build a just and humane society anchored on our motto, makadiyos, makatao, makakalikasan, at makabansa. And likewise, our Filipino values, bayanihan, balikatan, malasakit, galang, ugnayan, and pananagutan. So these Filipino values and our motto, including our vision, it really spell out the well-being of the Filipino people. And looking at the well-being of the Filipino people, meaning to say that we have to promote our intergenerational responsibility, or the so-called intergenerational fairness. And that is really taking care of this feature for the next generation. So we as professionals, we need features thinking as a 21st competence or skill, really helpful to all of us public leaders, development and public leaders, and to its users, and likewise to our policymakers. If we engage in this kind of exercise, we will be able to contribute a better decision towards our preferred feature. So in using features thinking as a lens, we may ask a number of questions, the what if questions and the how might we questions, and also what are the implications of COVID-19 to professional development? What are the possible, plausible, probable, and preferred features of professional development? And of course, how will cities, our country, look like in the next 18 months, in the next 5 years, 10, or even 20 years, with the kind of professionals that we have in the country or in this kind of jurisdiction? So a lot of questions. And now with this kind of situation, it is really high time to formulate strategies. From the so-called VUCA to tuna world, turbulence, uncertain, novel, and ambiguous, according to Skoblik of 2020, we can turn these wicked problems into wicked opportunities by doing art. And by doing art, we need to be adaptive, resilient, and transformative. So when we engage in features thinking and strategic foresight, we are not predicting the future, but rather we are imagining multiple features in creative ways. And how do we do that? We do that by really making use of our creativity, our knowledge, our imagination. So when we do that, it heightens our ability to sense, shape, and adapt to what happens in the years ahead. So remember, we have our left and right brain, and our right brain is really about creative thinking. So futures thinking, according to the Government Office for Science, it is an approach to identifying long-term issues and challenges shaping the future development of a policy area, and to exploring their implications for policy development. And not only that, future studies and foresight and futures thinking really bring together key agents of change and various sources in order to develop strategic visions and anticipatory intelligence. So it's really about gathering anticipatory intelligence or mapping intelligence before we decide a, a decision in leadership and in public sector. And also, there are many benefits when we embark on this. And what are these benefits? Of course, one, it generates new ideas and approaches to a policy or strategy area. And we can explore innovative ways of responding to policy changes or challenges for that matter. And we can shift the focus of senior leader or management dialogue towards the long term. Remember that we have the so-called short-termism culture. And there is a study introduced lately that the Philippines rank lowest when it comes to long-term thinking. We are into the so-called short-term thinking era for the moment. So we need to improve that. We need to improve the culture of strategic thinking to be more agile, adaptive, proactive, and future-facing. And if we do this, we will be able to attain or show thought leadership on a given topic. So it's really different to engage in futures thinking and policy foresight tools. In futures thinking, there are a number of policy foresight tools. And what are these? According to Suhail and Ayatullah and Ivana, we have backcasting, we have visioning next steps, scenarios, we're doing that, the CLA or the causal layered analysis. We also have the emerging issue analysis, features wheel, shared history, features triangle, features landscape, and a lot more. So it's really science-based. No, we are not predicting the future, but we are studying the future. We are using our imagination, our creativity in order to identify emerging issues. So professionals like us, if we do this, we can identify emerging issues, negotiate uncertainties. And of course, by doing that, we can articulate scenarios. There are different worldviews, and we have to map and gather intelligence in order for us to build scenarios. And by building scenarios, we can develop a common vision of the desired future and introduce innovation. And of course, by introducing innovation, we can design robust policies and strategies, often despite limited resources and a complex environment. So here, we need to look at likewise the local perspective. As you mentioned in your theme, or in the topic assigned to me, we need to look at the local perspective. And what is this local perspective? We have to go in that indigenous approach. So Hiraya foresight is an indigenous approach towards a preferred feature. And Hiraya is an ancient Filipino word, the only word that gives the potential of the future of tomorrow to illuminate on the present, meaning our kinabukasan or our future. Hiraya glows and radiates, for it subsumes a lot of unexpressed meaning, significances, and meaning implications. So the Hiraya foresight as an approach towards futures-ready professionals, we need to take a look at key areas. And one of these, of course, is engage in current trends. We need to be catalysts of change likewise. Communication is very important. We need to put the right message across. We need to communicate our scenarios. And equally important are our values. We need to be morally upright because as futures thinkers, we don't want bad things to happen in our country. We are always looking at our preferred future, our better future. So when we look at better future, we need to be socially responsible. We need to have that ability or skill to look at the so-called intergenerational fairness. And of course, we need to have that ability to change the norm versus the new norm. And what else? We have to be factual evidence-based professionals, but we don't set aside the human dimension. That's why the nexus of people, policy, and technology is very important. In people, we are here to share knowledge and we need to empower others. We need discipline and individual responsibility, and of course, engage in the community. When we look at technology, we are looking at, of course, at the very start, strengthen our surveillance, contact tracing, infection prevention control with the use of AI. artificial intelligence and Internet of Things. But if we look at the policy, we need to have features thinking. We need to embed features thinking, strategic foresight, and future-proof strategies in our tasks, in our individual and organizational tasks in order for us to be futures ready. And not only that, we need to be evidence-based. So factual evidence plus human dimension equals the nexus of people, policy, and technology. So in this light, we have to remember the 5 R's. And what are the 5 R's? We need to rethink. We need to reframe our mindset. We think about our policies, our structures. We need to retool our strategies. And of course, we need to reskill ourselves as professionals. And not only that, one important thing or another important R is re-energize. In re-energizing, we need to have the so-called mental health, proper mental health in order for us to be productive as professionals in the public sector. And remember this, imagination is the currency of the future. So what is your preferred future? Our preferred future, of course, is really for us to see a better community, which is safe, stable, and we can control it as we can say it. But of course, we can't control everything, but we can create our own future. So we need professional creating sustainable results today for tomorrow. And that is really about intergenerational fairness. Another thing that we take into consideration is this list of OECD, the value of foresight in policy making. So if we do this, we have the so-called better anticipation, policy innovation, and future proofing. So with that basis, on that note, what are the main messages? For the 21st century, we need skill sets and competencies required to be futures ready. And these are foresight, futures thinking, ethical leadership, and design thinking. And if I have to summarize that into 2, we need frenetic leaders. Frenetic leaders are wise and ethical leaders, and we need futurist leaders, leaders who have an anticipatory governance mindset. So these are 2 things that we need as professionals, frenetic and futurist professionals. So what are the main messages in this presentation? What skill sets and competencies are required for us professionals to be futures ready? Well, there are 9 here. We have adaptability or flexibility. We have problem sensitivity, critical thinking, systems analysis, meaning to say that we are looking at the bigger picture. Then interpreting the meaning of information to others, meaning to say, how do we put the right message across? That's why communication is very important. And we need to influence others. We need to be frenetic leaders. We need to see frenesis in others, meaning to say we need to see goodness in each other. And by seeing goodness in each other, we will be able to create new value. As professionals, we always ask the question, what added value do we give in that particular service? And of course, by creating new value, we can balance or reconcile competing, contradictory, or incompatible demands. And of course, dilemmas in this world of complexity, complex interdependence. And equally important really is taking responsibility. And that taking responsibility is all about the so-called intergenerational fairness. But there are other skills that we need as professionals to be futures ready. Yes. And of course, that is foresight, futures thinking, ethical leadership, and design thinking. If I have to summarize or cluster all these skill sets and competencies into 2, then we'll have frenetic and futurist leaders. Frenetic meaning to say we need to have wise and ethical professionals, and at the same time, futurists or professionals who have an anticipatory mindset. So frenetic and futurist professionals in the Philippines would really spell out a very good future for the country and for the next generation. So that is why in promoting futures thinking in the Philippines, we started with democratizing futures. We started with knowledge sharing. We started with FT 101, sharing our ideas so that everyone will have its own handles on how to design a good future. And after democratization, we are now on the deepening features. Deepening features is really about deep diving and using the tools which I shared to you earlier. And after that, maybe in the next 5 or 10 years, we can institutionalize features. And of course, harvest features. So as a conclusion and recommendation, we need to cultivate FFT, foresight and futures thinking. We can start small, then later on institutionalize through intense, cooperative, collaborative education and training. So it's really about education, training, research, and advocacy. Being in the public sector is all about public advocacy. And in institutionalizing foresight, we need to have a central unit, maybe a National Institute on Futures Thinking and Anticipatory Governance. We have a bill on already, it's on the desk. And the last thing, based on the topic also, is to contextualize it, look at the local perspective. And by looking at the local perspective, we have to use indigenous concepts like bayanihan and hiraya in the Philippines. So as we democratize futures thinking in the country, it is now the right time to really discover and tap our own local knowledge and wisdom. That is why Hiraya Foresight becomes a suitable indigenous base of futures thinking. So the professionals of today in the country are professionals who are frenetic and futurist for that matter. Maraming salamat, Hiraya Manawari.